Hello everybody, and welcome once again to the King's Crypt. In this video I have Some Doors Should Never Be Opened, written by OpinionatedIMO of r/nosleep. Please sit back, grab your blanket, and enjoy the story. Rummaging around in the clutter of my grandparents' attic one afternoon, I moved a heavy stack of old boxes. Behind them, I discovered a weird hidden doorway. It was locked with a heavy-duty padlock. I tried to pry the fortified enclosure open, but it wasn't about to reveal its secrets. Out of frustration, I stuck my ear to the moldy oak panel to listen. I could have sworn I heard something on the other side of the child-sized opening. After a moment, the feeling passed and I assumed it was only my imagination playing tricks on me. I was curious what was stored inside the tiny locked space, so I asked my grandmother about it. And as soon as the words escaped my curious lips, she gasped audibly, and then scolded me for snooping in places where I wasn't supposed to be. I was rather startled by her severe, triggered reaction, the level of which strongly suggested there was much more to the story. Now, ordinarily, Grandma was easygoing and never uttered a harsh word to anybody. It was a shocking exception to her typical demeanor. Further reinforcing the mystery, she warned me it wasn't safe to be up in the attic because reoccurring roof leaks had compromised the support joists, or so she said. After several unsubtle admonitions to discourage me from ever going back up there again, it was obviously a big deal, which made me want to do it that much more. You know how obstinate, precocious teenagers can be. As if to reinforce her unusually strict decree, the next time I tried to sneak up the forbidden steps, the staircase itself was barricaded, with all means of giving it to temptation being blocked. I had no chance at the time but to accept things as they were. I assumed the truth was mundane, and that it would be anticlimactic to find out what was actually behind the threshold. At least, that's what I tried to convince myself. But why would she go to such panicked levels? If that was the case, it made zero sense. Either way, I eventually forgot about the diminutive doorway. Years went by, and both of my grandparents passed away. Afterward, the house was locked up for the better part of a decade. First, my father maintained it. Then, he hired a caretaker once it became too much in his advanced age. As in the way of things for everybody, both of my parents grew frail and passed, very close to the same time. I was relieved and thankful that neither of them had to be without the other for too long. It was a sobering experience, though, to find myself alone. As the sole heir and inheritor of the shuttered family estate, it became my responsibility to go through it and sell or discard the unwanted contents. Property taxes and external upkeep were costing me a fortune, so I made the pragmatic decision to get the museum ready to put on the market. For a retirement nest egg, that is. I hadn't been to the place in years. Hundreds of recollections came flooding back as I walked through it. As a kid, many happy memories were made within these walls, and I was tempted to become sentimental and leave it be. Deep down, though, I knew that would be counterproductive and a waste of the opportunity. It was pointless to put things off any longer. I had to rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with. As if details of the secret door had been deliberately blocked by my subconscious mind, until I would have unencumbered access to see it, I was reminded again of the buried memory. I actually sprinted up the stairs like a police detective. While the stairs and attic floor creaked a bit, there was no sign of catastrophic damage or risk of collapse, like my grandmother had warned me about years earlier. To my dismay, the area was even more cluttered and junky, but I wasn't about to be deterred. I staged the boxes down the hall corridor so I could expose the mysterious door again. Unbelievably, once the contents were removed, I was faced with an ordinary wall to deny my efforts. There was no sign of the door. For a brief moment, I second-guessed myself. Had the entire episode been some kind of dream or vivid hallucination? False memories are a well-documented phenomenon. but I didn't want to accept that I'd invented the entire episode. I tapped on the wall in frustration. I even considered that maybe I was mistaken about which wall the door was on, and I moved the obstacles away from the other 3 sides in furious determination. None of them, however, sported the thick, child-sized door that I expected to see. Then I realized that the side I remembered having the door was blocked by a new, false wall added later. I galloped down the steps, 2 at a time, and out to my work truck. In my toolbox, I had a hammer, pry bar, and all the right equipment to tear down the deceptive facade. In about 20 minutes, I had my answer. Directly in front of me was the damned oak door again. The bizarre memory, until recently buried and lost, had been officially resurrected and vindicated. Still, long after my grandparents and parents had died, I hesitated to put the hammer and chisel to the rusty padlock, to finally answer the burning question of what was on the other side. There was no one left to stop me any longer, but I realized how important it had obviously been to her. Grandma must have had her reasons to go to such ridiculous lengths to hide it. In honor of respecting her memory and wishes, I weighed all pros and cons of defying those unknown possibilities. In the end, though, you know what I decided to do. It was the same as nearly anyone in my shoes would. I was terrified, but I had to know. The suspense was killing me. The hammer struck the old padlock with a heavy metallic thud. It required 3 hard blows to snap open again. I thought I heard something of significant size scurrying around on the other side of the barrier. My heart heaved. I removed the ruined lock from the hasp and tossed it aside, but then hesitated to actually turn the liberated knob, to reveal its dark secrets. My instincts warned me against going any further down the rabbit hole, but my higher logic argued how silly that was. It was my home now, to do whatever I wanted. I owned the deed. Grandma's sternly delivered warnings all those years ago had no bearing on my decisions any longer. I turned the handle. Slowly, I pulled it towards me. The hinges creaked in protest, exactly as I suspected they would. The fading sunlight from the single attic window in the corner did little to illuminate inside the hidden space. I used my cell phone flashlight to peer into the darkness. There was no pile of human bones or lock boxes with treasure brimming out the top, as my teenage self imagined. The room was completely empty. My head wanted to explode from the unbelievable, disappointing letdown. Why go to that effort? I crawled partially inside to confirm what I witnessed with the focused beam of light. My body was halfway in the closet-sized area when I spotted some hastily scrawled writing on the side of one wall. I crept in further to read it, and once my body fully passed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me like a deadening rifle shot. The powerful thwack absolutely startled me at the time, but I assumed it was merely caused from a cross-ventilation vacuum. That was until I realized a vacuum would have required an opening on the other side to suck the door closed. I had been too distracted by needing to read the mysterious writing to focus on being safe. As soon as I had had enough time to absorb the bitter irony of crawling fully inside to read the cryptic warning about not doing so, the damage was done. Do not let the portal to the other side close completely behind you. It read in a frantic, hand-lettered scrawl. You will be trapped within the chamber of death for 2 entire days of torment. I immediately versed my body into the tight space behind me, slithering back over to turn the knob to escape. But the snare was triggered already. The creepy message in the empty space worked unintentionally as bait to lure me inside. Chamber of Death. My mind raced to decrypt what that might mean. The door itself was not going to budge. That was much clear. I twisted the knob and beat on the wood until my fists were bruised and bloody. I was trapped with absolutely no recourse. Whatever the secret room actually was, it did not allow any cell reception to filter through either. I had to hope the writing warning was true about it only being a 2-day lockup for my stupidity. No one knew I was there, or would come searching for me. Almost immediately, I felt like I was no longer trapped in a tiny crawlspace room in my grandparents' attic. The pitch black room felt immense. I shut off my phone to conserve power. Even if I couldn't call for help, it offered me the possibility of game entertainment and a relative source of timekeeping in the decompression chamber-like stimuli-free environment that I found myself in. That's when everything really started flying off the rails. I saw creepy things hovering nearby in the darkness. Fascinating but sinister lights whirled around me and zipped across the so-called portal. A discoloration to the ambient fog in the air made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Then came the charnel stench of a dozen rotting slaughterhouses. It was unbearably rank, yet I had no means of escaping it. That's when the dead souls started arriving en masse. I wasn't cordoned off or protected from their wrath, and they knew I was still alive. Fear doesn't cover what I went through. Nothing could. Human words cannot convey the extremities of emotion you experience when you dwell in the same locked space with a procession of them. My fingertips bled from clawing the old wood and surrounding walls for a way out. I finally understood my grandmother's unhinged reaction to my younger self discovering the exposed door. What I still didn't get was the appeal of having an open portal to hell in the first place. What could possibly entice a person to open that cursed doorway for any reason at all? I was terrified shitless, and I couldn't imagine how I came to be there, or why my grandparents didn't do a better job of barricading the doorway prior to when I stumbled upon it. Neither of them struck me as being involved with the supernatural or the occult blackened arts. Regardless, Grandma clearly knew what it was, but at the moment, it didn't matter. I was too frightened to worry about the origins of the hellhole. I found myself trapped inside. I had to survive the next 2 days first. Once my activation triggered the dead to begin showing up, I realized opening the door summoned them to be there. None of them were happy whatsoever about being pawns to the dark forces that controlled the portal. But they were apparently following rules. No matter how menacing they wanted to be, killing me was thankfully off limits. There was no guidebook lying around to clarify the parameters. But once I understood that they couldn't physically harm me, it took a great deal of the pressure off. Now, I'm not saying it was a picnic by any stretch of the imagination, but you can even begin to desensitize to the most malevolent mental torture of having untold, festering corpses threatening to eat you alive after a while. I just had to constantly remind myself, if they could do any of those nightmarish deeds, they would have done them immediately. It was about sadism, of lingering fear which they craved. Soon, it occurred to me why the brave would subject themselves to 48 hours lounging in hell's rest stop. It was because the dead had answers to the mysteries of life and they know the future. The tricky part is how to obtain these facts. They wouldn't simply submit to a question and answer session. I had to get very, very clever. As with the unspoken rule about them not being able to harm living participants, I assumed they were also required to be fully truthful if the statements made were phrased perfectly, as in a professional debate. They were so fixated on tormenting me, they didn't realize I was using them to obtain useful knowledge and information. Under those controlled conditions, I decided they had to be honest and forthright. I can't say there wasn't collateral damage in this underhanded quid pro quo of mine. They could quite literally see the writing on the wall, and knew it was my very first time trapped in the underworld. Dozens of them teased me that they had written the warning message on the wall, but it was just deceitful propaganda. According to them, I was permanently trapped in hell with them. I had no proof the 2-day release decree was accurate. I'm not gonna lie, crippling doubt crept into my mind and took up residence. The what-ifs were powerful tools that they employed to frighten me, as I kept hearing it over and over in their relentless taunting. Finally, I was able to overcome the psychological setback. After I pointed out that if what they claimed was true, there'd be no reason to scare me about it. I'd live the devastating truth in just 36 more hours. The ferocious, gnashing teeth I witnessed after exposing that lie created a powerful euphoria in me. I'd guess it rivaled a potential narcotic high. They were so furious that I applied logic against them, even during the repeated volleys aimed at eroding my hope, that I took immense pleasure in tormenting them right back. Thus, I realized why my grandparents caved to the masochistic temptation to put themselves through the ordeal. It is incredibly addictive to fight them and glean their tightly held secrets about the future of humanity. During that initial excursion, I experienced horrific self-doubt, unrelenting fear, extreme exhaustion, and numerous urges to do things I dare not mention. But I also experienced unparalleled joy. Honestly, I never felt more alive than when I thought I might not return. The electrifying experience is that powerful. Therein lies the danger. It drags you back to the diabolical door. Unfortunately, I must acknowledge some painful truths. I'm documenting my deadly mistakes to prevent others from following the same irreversible path. Do not open this literal doorway to hell. Please leave it be. It's of utmost importance that you recognize the grave error that I made by unsealing the lock and traveling to the other side. Some of the malignant effects of crossing the threshold are obvious. They came almost immediately. A proliferation of festering tumors ravaged my body overnight after the first excursion. And yet, I stupidly went back for more. Sadly, that's the ticket for admission for divination secrets. My battered psyche is irrevocably diseased from the madness, as well as my withering flesh. I suspect the toll for any dangerous, reoccurring behavior is cumulative. Physical rot and psychological decay will magnify every time you yield to it. For the reader of this testimony, I urge you to believe in and accept the irreparable damage I've brought upon myself. Learn from my arrogant mistakes. I cannot destroy the door, nor is hiding it a permanent solution. When the authorities came after my death to settle my personal affairs, they will eventually find it. If you are that unfortunate soul, do not give in to play with the supernatural fire that I did. My ruin came from innocent curiosity, and then by consuming greed. As they say, money is the root of all evil. Any financial windfalls you accumulate from this dangerous game will not cure the terminal illness that ravages your body and mind afterward, as it does mine now. Trust me, some doorways are never meant to be opened. Hello, everybody. Thank you. And I really hope you enjoyed listening to this content. Please remember to go give this fantastic artist some love at r/nosleep. If you enjoyed this content, please follow the pinned playlist at the end of this video so you can find and enjoy the rest of the content on this channel. Also, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share with all of your spooky friends and family. It is much appreciated, and it will be how we grow. Thank you for your daily visit to the King's Crypt. And as always, have a killer day.